Well, you have had, we must say, a storied career. What are you feeling right now, knowing you're in your last month in office?
It's really a tremendous amount of pride. It feels like our organization is in a better place than when I started, and I'm very proud of that. It's been a team effort. You know, I've given people the opportunity, I believe, to succeed, and they've taken that and run with it. We've gotten an awful lot accomplished during the last 7 years, and so a lot of pride. You know, we've gotten through some rough spots, and they all had resilience and this passion to persevere, and so a lot of pride. I'm looking forward to being retired, though. It's after 39 years of working, and the last 7 has been, you know, this constant churning, and so I'm pretty happy but ready.
You had a lot of firsts in your law enforcement career. Let's talk about the firsts. Tell me your first.
Well, you know, there have been trailblazers. I mean, there was a first woman that worked in the department back in the 1920s, Dolly Fisher, but I was the first female to be promoted to commander. And that's the bureau level where you actually get to kind of run your own shop. And
that's a policy level.
Yeah, you get to sit in on the general staff meetings and have a voice in some of the policy decisions. And I did that for 14 years. I worked in communications, so our 911 center, internal affairs, and then patrol, and then also at the training academy as a commander. And great experiences, running your own shop, but also being a part of the decision making that goes on around here. You get access to the chief and the deputy chiefs, and so I enjoyed that a lot. But then I was also the first female to be promoted to deputy chief, so to be in executive staff. The chief and the deputy chiefs are executive staff, and I did that for about 3 years, and then I've been chief for 7 years now, so the first female chief. My goal, in part of that, is not only to be a role model for other women, but to be the first of many, not the first and only. And so, you know, there's a matter of doing the job well enough that people will say, well, that experiment worked. Let's try it again someday if some other female comes along and wants to do it too.
But the reality was, it was an experiment. And there was a lot of what I viewed at that time of, well, we're going to make one seat at the table for one woman. We have to have a woman. We're going to pick out this chair. And a lot of women in our generation thought, I want that seat. But you didn't just worry about getting the seat, you worried about bringing more women to the table.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't do any good to be the first and they're like, oh, let's never do that again, kind of a thing. So it was really important that the role modeling affect not only people from outside the organization, which I was really actually surprised by how much it meant to women in our community. You know, groups would stand up and clap just recognizing me as the female chief, and but internally as well. I mean, a lot of our female officers have said how important it was to them to see that it's possible, and so it's been pretty satisfying to know that it meant a lot to a lot of other women throughout the city.
But let's not candy coat this, because I'm sure when you first started, even when you first started as a patrol officer, when you graduated from the academy, there weren't a lot of women in the police department or the fire department. And I imagine you met with some resistance from veteran officers who did not think a woman should be carrying a badge.
Oh, absolutely. While I was on OJT, so in the academy, already hired, one officer was assigned to work with me, and he said, I don't think women should be police officers. I'm like, well, they already hired me, you know, so too late for that, and I'll try to prove you wrong. I became his chief. You know, he was still working as an officer when I became chief. So I thought, but you know, I think that he probably changed his mind over the years and saw women doing the job, but initially, yes, I think that a lot of our new female officers that hit the streets in the 70s faced a lot of sexism. You know, some males that didn't want to work with a female, not knowing if she could back them up, you know, or take care of business, you know, in a fight or something like that. So there was a lot of skepticism and some real sexism that they didn't want to work with you, or, you know, kind of stayed clear of you.
There had to be a certain sense of satisfaction when you did become a commander and the deputy chief and the chief, to know that there were still some men on the force who had said a woman shouldn't be an officer.
You know, it's sometimes that skepticism, you just have to prove people wrong. And so women have been, you know, working patrol since 1976, and now we've got this great big history. You know, I truly believe that women have brought to policing some of the things that our community members are asking for all the time: communication skills, de-escalation, calming behaviors. That's what women had to do. We didn't have the upper body strength to just grab somebody and haul them off to jail. We had to kind of talk them into cooperating. And so I think that we've brought that ability, those skills, and shown men how to do some of that.
You know, you've also, in the time that you've been on the force, and certainly over the last few years, there have been some controversies for the police department. And let's talk about some of them. The video that came out of an officer seeming to kick someone on the head when they were prone and on the ground caused a lot of community anger. Sure. And an immediate reaction from City Hall, with the mayor being very critical. Tell me how you were handling all of that at that time, and what was going through your mind about what this did to the image of the police department.
Well, certainly the image is very concerning to us, because it's hard to change perception without having facts. And, you know, at that time, the immediacy, we didn't have all the facts. We didn't know what was going through people's heads. We didn't know everything about it. So you're responding to people that are reacting to perception rather than all of the information. And we've had to deal with that on a regular basis. You know, people reacting, and then we get the facts, and okay, now I understand. And that's how a lot of complaints actually happen, is people don't understand why it occurred the way that it did. And so as we found out more about that and were able to investigate it, we realized that yes, indeed, this was behavior that we do not want to see. You know, the officer was disciplined ultimately. You know, he lost his job, but he got his job back. And my path is to do what I think is right for our community, right for our organization, and right for that officer. And all of those matters. They're all stakeholders. You know, I can't lose an officer if I discipline them too harshly and they don't want to work for the rest of their career, but they're here. And because of other precedent-setting things, you have to kind of go along with what has been done in the past. I mean, that's part of just cause. That's part of, you know, our contractual past practice and past benefits issues. So I have to take all of that into consideration and can't just react like a lot of people, you know, did based on the image. Very troubling image, obviously. I said that from the beginning. But when all the facts are in, I made a recommendation that I thought was appropriate for the situation, and know that that officer understands that he has to never do something like that again. Get all the information, as he did not have. You know, he thought, in his mind's eye, whatever, something different than what was actually going on. So bottom line is, you know, we have to make sure that people aren't reacting to just an image and getting all the facts and trying to lay that back out. I think we've successfully used our social media and our messaging to play that out. Things that are inflammatory. You know, we even had an image of a situation with an officer that a lot of people got very upset about, seeing the officer with his gun hidden behind his leg. And people read that as escalation, but it was actually exactly what they've said they wanted, de-escalation. And so the education process of trying to get our community members to understand how officers have to do their job, why they have to take certain precautions in doing that, and why some situations go a little bit sideways, is part of our messaging and trying to educate people as far as why they might have had to do that, and then getting all the facts and determining if it was, you know, proper or not.
I remember at the time, I think of the Henry Green shooting, there were protesters who marched from City Hall over here to the police headquarters, and there was this public perception by a large swath of the community that there was a racial problem between the police department and the citizens of Columbus. Was there any validity to their belief?
They have, you know, people have their own beliefs. I don't believe that that particular shooting had anything to do with race, but understand that while we're doing a criminal investigation of those officers, you know, and it's a criminal investigation, so we don't talk about criminal investigations. We don't get to put our side out there. But whoever wants to, from the community, the family, whoever else, can say whatever they feel like saying. A lot of misinformation was put out there, and a lot of good information was not. The fact that Henry Green, you know, did fire his weapon was kind of lost in the muddle. So that misinformation is something that people can put out there, and then it takes us a while to, you know, get the facts out there.
Your hands are tied in some of those instances.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, the prosecuting attorney is going to take that to the grand jury. So us talking about the case could tamper, you know, with people's ideas when they go to the grand jury and various other things. So we don't put out a lot of information, and that's the appropriate thing to do. It's just that we suffer then sometimes from people that are putting out bad information, unattributed information, or just flat out making up stories.
You said at the beginning of this interview you have a lot of pride. Let's talk about the specifics. What do you look back at after your 39-year career and say, that was a good move?
You know, I truly believe that as much as we need to continue to do this and grow it, our community engagement is so very different than it used to be. Officers used to try to interact with community members, you know, stop in someplace, and they would get chastised for being off patrol. You know, they would get chastised for being away from their duties. Now we encourage that. Stop in the rec centers, stop in the pools, and go to places and interact. Get out of your car and go into some businesses. We've been encouraging that now for some time, and so our level of community engagement is very high. We go out, and we've even changed the way we do community meetings. Instead of just being a Q&A session, you know, for me to answer questions, we've changed it to a dialogue. So I'll bring 20 or 30 cops in. We all sit down and talk to 100 community members, and it's more, you know, like 5 or 6 people instead of 100 to 1. And it's just a lot more information being spread, and our officers learn from our community members what their concerns are. So I'm very, very proud of the way that we are now community-minded. I wrote that into our vision statement when I became chief, that we'll be progressive, diverse, trustworthy, and community-minded. And I believe that we're all of those. And the community-minded means that we're paying attention to what they say. You know, in the charges of racism, we are definitely listening to. I now have taken 250 people to Washington to go through the Holocaust Museum and the African American Museum so that we understand some of these issues of racism and human rights issues and civil rights issues. So we've come a long way from where we were 40 years ago, kind of telling people what we thought was best for them.
What's your advice to whoever it is who takes over this office when you're gone?
Keep the lines of communication open, and that's both with the community and our own people. I've attended more than 300 community meetings or speaking events, or, you know, lots of those kind of more formal stuff, and then tons more of just informal stuff. Get to know business people, get to know community members, get to know, you know, the pastors in the community, and stay in touch with them, know who they are. But also our members, our employees here. They need to know that you've got their back. If they're doing the right thing, they need that support, visible support. Our community does support us. You know, there is no doubt in my mind. We saw it when Steve Smith was killed. We saw it on any number of occasions. Our community supports law enforcement, but they don't always see that or feel that. And so it's really important that they hear that from their chief as well.
You know, you mentioned the Steve Smith. There have to have been low points. That had to have been, you know, those incidents when you lost someone in the line of job who was trying to do just got up and went to work one morning and never went home. Are those the hardest points to take?
Absolutely. It's the phone call that you never want to happen. And, Steve was shot and didn't die right away. He lived for a few days, valiant attempts to save his life. We all had hope because he was such a fighter. But so we had a little bit of time to come to grips with what might happen. But that's a phone call you just never want to be a part of. And then, to be with his family over those days and try to keep the spirits up of everybody else who was praying for him, in our community too, was extremely difficult. I mean, I consider it a failure on my part, that I wasn't able to protect him. But it's a tough job, and you can't be everywhere all the time. And he did, what he loved to do, and he understood what the risks were. So, yeah, it was tough. It's just one of those things where you understand that it could happen, but you never want it to happen here.
When you became the chief, you were kind of a beacon for that community that was still trying to say, we're just like everybody else. Right. Did you feel the pressure of that?
To some degree, but we had other gay employees here who were already making some strides in trying to connect the police and the LGBT community, and I think we've definitely come a long ways. Our relationship with Stonewall and everything else has grown. Even through some difficult times, we have strengthened that relationship, in my opinion, but not just with Stonewall, but with just the gay community as a whole. And everybody knows that we're welcome. The video that we made in conjunction with Columbus State, It Gets Better video, is still heartwarming to watch, because a lot of our employees that really weren't out came out to be a part of that anti-bullying video. And it made a statement to our community and our LGBT community that we care about them. And the praise that we got from a lot of members of our community about that sent a very strong message about how we were going to interact with them and treat them.
Was there a surprise when you started to walk in the Gay Pride Parade? What was the reaction, the first reaction you got from that? There had to be some people going, wait, what?
Yeah. It was interesting, because a lot of people weren't sure what to think of it. Like, why is she here, and why would she do that, kind of a thing. But it became very, very comfortable feeling. It's like, I belong here, And so it was a neat transition to participate with our other officers that wore uniforms, actually marching in the parade for the first time while I was chief.
At the most recent graduation, you made, I thought, some pointed comments toward the mayor. He has talked about having this nationwide search, and that he's looking for a difference maker. I think your comments to him during graduation were more focused on, you need good leadership.
Mayor, as you look for and choose the next leader of this outstanding organization, I would ask you to make sure that it's someone who they deserve. Because for all they do in our community, and for all we ask of them, they deserve the very best.
Do you think maybe that leadership is right here within this department?
Oh, there are plenty of people here that I believe could lead the department, yes. And not just this next time, but down the road. I have talked to any number of people that I see are stars here, and said, you have the material to be sitting in my chair. Someday you might consider sitting here, and to start thinking about how they can prepare for that, because the more that they experience within the organization, the better prepared they are. And so I've tried to mentor any number of people. We've got a lot of stars here, a lot of brilliant thinkers, very well educated people. So yeah, I believe that we certainly have the kind of people that could become chief here, and we've always produced a lot of chiefs for other agencies.
Do you think it will be a morale breaker if the chief does not come within the ranks, from within the ranks?
It would depend on how that chief introduces themselves. you know, how they're going to start their tenure. It shouldn't be an automatic morale breaker. What happens is, if it's changed, then people are always concerned about this uncertain time. So, you know, as soon as you can, when you're making change, you have to let people know how it's going to affect them. And so if the new chief is a change, you know, somebody from the outside that they don't know, they're going to have a job of trying to introduce themselves so that the uncertainty can go away. You know, that, hey, I've got your back, and various other things to actually connect with the people that they don't know.
Would you like the person who replaces you to be from in the department or outside the department?
Not knowing who's going to apply, it's hard for me to say, but I certainly feel that we have a good thing going here. Everyone that works here as a sworn law enforcement officer has been through the Columbus Police Training Academy. And we consider our training academy to be the best in the country. And so that is part of our culture. And so we feel very strongly that our culture is one of pride and professionalism. And so, you know, yeah, I think I have a bias towards somebody that would come from here.
You know, as you look toward retirement, you've got to be thinking, I am not going to have to get up and be at work, and I'm not going to have to handle those phone calls, and I'm not going to have to worry about the crime statistics. What are you most looking forward to?
The other side of that is, what am I going to do? But no, we love to travel, so we'll be traveling. We've got a few trips planned for this year and then beyond. But I also want to continue to stay connected to the division. I'm hoping that I can stay connected to the Police Foundation, because that's who has allowed us to take those trips to Washington. And we still would like to build a learning center here in headquarters that children on school trips could come down and visit and get to know police officers and interact with them and see some of the things that we use and how we do our job.
What's the one thing you would like to say to the people of Columbus before you hang up your badge?
7 years ago, when Mayor Coleman said, "You're going to be the chief," I walked back along the side of a mile and said, I'm responsible for the safety of all 800,000+ people that live here. And it felt like an awesome responsibility, and I feel like the team has done just that for the last 7 years, as we've looked out for them, have a genuine concern for their safety and their well-being. And I've appreciated getting to know so many community members. One of the perks of being chief is that people want to know who you are. And so my list of contacts grew exponentially, and I feel like I really do have a great relationship with so many community members. And they desire that, and we've been able to do that on a fairly large scale. And so it's a big thank you. Thanks for letting me do this. Thanks for letting all of the division members perform their job. Thanks for the support. And you know, just it's been awesome to be able to serve so many people for so many years, and get that sense of satisfaction that you get when you help others.
Well, we wish you the best of luck in your retirement.
Thanks, Colleen.
And happy travels.
Thank you very much. Do appreciate it.